we cannot live without our microbiome. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Bernadette Dulawan in another episode of our educational video. So our topic for tonight is about gut health. Why gut health? Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, has said that all illnesses, all diseases start with the gut. A foundational system that we should start with is the digestive system. It's a system that is more than just for digestion. It has so many roles, and it's an amazing system that has an ecosystem inside it called the microbiome, which is about 100 trillion organisms that we cannot live without. Also, another concept of the intestinal lining and the importance of the integrity of that intestinal lining for us to stay healthy. But first of all, let's recall the anatomy of the digestive system. It actually starts from the mouth into the anus. So it starts with our oral cavity, chewing our food, going down into our esophagus and up into our upper gut, just near the sternum is our stomach. Then it leads up to the small intestines, then leads into the large intestines, down into our rectum and into the opening called the anus. So that's a hollow tube, like it's the tubular gross anatomy of our digestive system. So when we look at the intestines in particular, we have microvilli, which are actually finger-like structures on the surface of the small intestines, and that is meant to increase the absorptive surface. It senses the environment that our body, through our food, is subjected to. This structure is so important because our intestinal lining is a barrier of our body from the outside world. Pretty much just like our skin is the barrier to the outside world externally. So remember this, our intestinal lining is a thin layer of one single layer of tall cells, columnar cells, that are stuck together like this in very tight junctions. There are tight junctions in there. It's almost impermeable except for very fine digested foods and micronutrients. That is the nature of our intestinal lining, and tightly knit together. Over that is a teeming, the second structure, which is called the microbiome, which is actually bacteria mostly, but some authors say it's a combination of all the microorganisms, including fungus, parasites, and viruses. 80% of them are friendly bacteria. Only 20% of them are unfriendly. If there is 80% good and 20% bad, and that's a happy community. That is the microbiome, and it's so real. In fact, they say that if we were to weigh them, they would weigh about 2 kilograms. Imagine 2 kilograms of the microbiome sitting in our intestines. And this is where an important concept of respecting this gut bacteria comes through, because we cannot live without our microbiome. They actually do a lot of function, including taking care of our intestinal lining, feeding on undigested fibers called prebiotics, things that we don't digest is their food. These are plant-based fibers called prebiotics. That is the one that keeps them alive, and they form short-chain fatty acids. When they digest, these fibers are important for the integrity of our intestinal lining. So that's one important role of the microbiome. They create metabolites. These metabolites are digested and they are sent into our bodily systems and into the brain. What The third role of our microbiome is for immunity. They help us with keeping our immunity intact. When the microbiome is disturbed, remember the 80 good bacteria, 20% bacteria ratio is disturbed by anything, and we will learn what could disturb this, then that creates what we call dysbiosis. Dysbiosis means there generally is this imbalance of the bad guys over the good guys. Once you have this, it becomes, in other words, leaky, and that's where the leaky gut term comes in. The integrity of this intestinal lining has to be there, as I said, for our health, for us to stay healthy. But when dysbiosis creates unhealthy cells, then they shrivel, they become unhealthy, and the tight junction now becomes leaky. I usually use my fingers. If this is the lining of the cells, this where they are so intact and nothing goes through except very, very fine nutrients, they become leaky, and you can see the spaces between my fingers. Anything, therefore, goes through that spaces when there is a continuous influx of foreign bodies in different forms. It could be viruses, it could be bacteria, bad bacteria, undigested food, gluten particles, partially digested, smaller particles of casein from lactose. This can get in, they can go into circulation and mainly into the brain, and they cause also a leaky brain. Just as we have our intestinal lining guarding us, shielding us from the outside world through our food, the blood-brain barrier is in our brain doing the same function. But the same thing that inflames our gut goes into the brain. So leaky gut equals leaky brain. And back to an intestinal lining. When the leaky gut continues, this doesn't go back, then there is a continuous influx of things, foreign invaders, things that are not supposed to be in our system, that will eventually overwhelm the T cells. And when these cells are overwhelmed, this is when, things go haywire, they're not under control, it goes into the system, and this is when autoimmunity comes in. We seek to educate and empower you to live healthy, vibrant lives.